So warm welcome to all our partners, friends, students, alumni, colleagues from around the globe. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the University of Toronto's Engineering's Leading Through COVID-19 Resilience and Recovery virtual industry panel discussion. I'm honored to welcome you to this event. My name is Chris Yip, and it's my privilege to serve as the Dean of the Faculty of Applied Science and Engineering here at the University of Toronto and as the inaugural Decanal Chair in Innovation. I became the dean effectively almost 2 years ago, July 2nd, 2019, after serving for 2 years as the associate vice president in the university's international partnerships office. And I'm a huge proponent of partnerships, global partnerships, and giving our students this global opportunity to learn, to experience, to work, and build a global education for our campus. Um, we're doing this virtually. I never expected that I would literally spend half my current term as dean running the faculty virtually. This is an interesting situation for all of us. It's one that we're learning to innovate on the fly. We've seen tremendous developments in technology and in strategies to deliver from the education perspective our courses, but also how we start to build partnerships. And today we're here to learn about how industry has pivoted and what they're learning as well as we go through this. I'm going to start by actually thanking the entire university community, our faculty, our staff, and our students for being amazingly resilient over this ongoing adventure, as I'll put it out there, and for everything that they've been doing to make such a positive impact on the community at large, whether that's on campus or whether it's within our own local communities. So today's industry-focused panel discussion is to look at the universal impact of COVID-19, look at some of the current challenges, things that sort of started at the beginning, but then, how is this positioning us for the future? How resilient leadership is going to enable us to rise and bring us through the recovery. We've seen some tremendously amazing developments. Just look at 10 months to develop a vaccine, or 4 vaccines now. I mean, that's just incredible acceleration of that drug discovery and vaccine development. Now we'll probably see amazing developments in supply chain logistics as we try to deploy those around the world. Engineering is playing an incredible role, both in the current situation, but as this rolls forward in terms of the recovery on a national scale across all sectors. So as the dean of the faculty, I'm incredibly interested in what our students and our faculty will be able to do, what our alumni are now doing in their respective sectors to help with the long-term economic recovery of the country, as it were. So to set the stage, industry partnerships are key to spurring critical research and translating results for engineering. We're interested in these are models of cooperation, and we look forward to how we can build these to solve really complex problems. So today, I'm really excited to be joined by 3 leading business experts from 3 different domains to discuss the impact of the pandemic and resilience in the face of adversity and in the face of a crisis which sort of doesn't really have like an end point. As I tell my students, it would have been really easy for us to figure out how to manage a problem like, we had a lab that had a water break. We could fix that pretty quickly. We know an effective end date. But here we're dealing with a situation which kind of keeps going and changing, right? And changes in response to our decisions and our strategies. I like to say this is the world's most ill-defined and underspecified complex problem. And those are problems that engineering loves to deal with. Students may not, but we love to set them up for working on those problems. Each of our panelists are bringing interesting and diverse perspectives to the conversation. They are coming from the Toronto Regional Board of Trade, Toronto Global, and TELUS. And we really look forward to the conversation. So I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to our panelists. I'm going to start with Marcy Burchfield, the Vice President of the Economic Blueprint Institute of the Toronto Region Board of Trade. Marcy leads the Economic Blueprint Institute, a strategic initiative of the Toronto Region Board of Trade with the goal of developing an economic blueprint for the innovation corridor. In response to the COVID crisis, the EBI released Shaping Our Future, a playbook for rebooting and reimagining the regional economy in the Ontario's innovation corridor, which outlines three transformations and a set of critical actions to build the Toronto region back stronger than it was before. Proud to say that Marcy is a U of T alum, graduate degree from U of T in geography and remote sensing and spatial analysis. And U of T and the Toronto Region Board of Trade work collaboratively to really build out the Toronto region, and that's the Toronto region as a global tech hub. Next is Stephen Lund, the new CEO of the Toronto Global, who joined back in September 23rd, 2020. So you would have actually onboarded in the middle of the pandemic. So
yeah, great
congratulations
timing.
for taking that.
Great timing.
Great timing, that giant leap.
Yeah.
Marcy's in Toronto. I'm going to say that Stephen looks like he's in Toronto right now, but he's going to give a bit of a shout out for the East Coast. He's currently in Shediac.
Quarantining in Shediac.
Quarantining in Shediac. Stephen brings over 30 years of experience in economic development, corporate banking, venture capital, and international finance to his new role here, I guess here with Toronto Global. Prior to joining Toronto Global, Stephen served as the CEO for Opportunities New Brunswick, the lead business development organization in New Brunswick, and it was the deputy minister for economic development and small business. U of T Engineering Toronto Global, over the past I can say 2.5, 3 years now, have really worked hand in hand to showcase the opportunities in the region, the talent pipeline, the research opportunities, and the way industry can partner and collaborate with engineering specifically, but actually with the university as a whole, to move challenges forward and to help build Toronto region as a tremendous hub of innovation across all sectors and showcasing all that the university has to offer. It's always been a tremendous conversation and a tremendous amount of fun actually to work with Toronto Global. Next is Dr. Ibrahim Gedeon, who's the Chief Technical Officer of TELUS. He is one of the global telecommunication industry's most eminent thought leaders. He has carved out an international career by combining insight and skill as an applied scientist with a lighthearted approach to leadership. And we're going to hear about that and get some insights into that today. As the CTO for TELUS, he is responsible for all tech development and strategy, security, service, network architecture, service delivery, and operational support systems, and their evolution and what's coming forward in the future. So under his leadership, the TELUS wireless broadband network has become one of the best in the world. I'm going to say that I wish we were really all in person because we'd all be sitting on a stage in comfy chairs. But Ibrahim, you're joining us today from Edmonton. I hope it's not too cold in Edmonton right now. But again, thank you all for joining us today. I'm really looking forward to our discussion. So you're all worried about what is he going to ask us first? Again, the key here is we're gonna dive into sort of the challenges that are sort of specific to your sectors, right? We've got Ibrahim's got sort of the tech sector and in a corporate sector, Marcy from the broader regional board of trade perspective, and then Stephen from kind of the investment attraction and what Toronto Global, how it's had to pivot to accommodate the pandemic. So I'm going to actually start. Maybe I'll get maybe an open question to start here, and really because you are the leaders of your respective domains and organizations, what do you perceive as the ongoing changes and critical issues that are impacting industry writ large right now? Just before we had this came in here, Ibrahim, you were talking a little bit about what I said about productivity. And I don't know if I want to lead in with that, but I'm just going to open the floor a little bit to what you think are the ongoing changes and critical issues that are facing the fields right now.
Well, let me jump in, Chris, and say, first of all, thank you. I want to take this time, even though I've only been here for a few months, back in the city. I used to live here years ago. Just to acknowledge the work that you and your team are doing. From our perspective, you're great partners and one of the key assets we have in this region as we move forward and really get out of this pandemic. And I think our lives have changed living in this pandemic world, and our business has changed as we go from hopping on a plane, knocking on a door to opening up a Zoom call. And it's a real different world. But if I can just use one word that describes, I think, what may be a challenge and an opportunity going forward, and that's talent. We're in a world that's very competitive for talent, and for us to be successful on the global stage in Toronto, we have to showcase what we have in our talent, and we're blessed with 18 universities and community colleges, but it's a war for talent. And in the last few days, I've been on a number of calls with some of the top IT companies in the world. The discussion is all around one thing: it's talent, people. That's what's going to drive for my success and our success as a region. There's lots of other things that Marcy knows a lot better than I do locally, but U of T Engineering School, the work that you guys are doing, is really going to be so critical to our success, not just in Toronto Global, but in the Toronto region going forward.
Great.
Yeah, and
Thanks.
maybe I could just jump in there as well, and just talk about the broader business community. Actually, Stephen and his group at Toronto Global did some work with us over the summer to really take the pulse of businesses. As the pandemic, in the spring, I think it was all like, well, maybe this will pass and we can get back to work soon. And then when it became very clear that we're in for the long haul, the board launched 6 recovery work tracks. And one of those work tracks were really dedicated specifically to the question of sector recovery. And what we wanted to know was how different sectors were faring. We did some survey work of our members to understand kind of what they needed in the immediacy in terms of government supports. And then these tables, actually, through these tables, we really wanted to know how we could help the business community, more broadly in the longer term. So we convened 11 sector tables to have those kinds of conversations. Toronto Global led, some of the sector tables that I'm referring to, along with colleagues at the Toronto Region Board of Trade. And obviously what we found was that sectors that relied on face-to-face interactions, obviously suffered the greatest. Our arts community, film, hospitality, tourism, and all of the businesses that the ecosystem that is part of. So you think about the airport area, one of the second largest employment areas in our region, devastated, absolutely devastated in terms of what COVID has done, along with a lot of the mainstream businesses. But some sectors like the finance community and real estate community, they actually saw a bit of growth, over the early days of the pandemic. And but other sectors like manufacturing, many of the businesses were able to innovate and install sort of new ways to mitigate risks of transmission, and while they resumed operations. And that's really the ultimate goal for all businesses: is how can we introduce sort of new tools, new processes, new routines that will allow people to get back to work while we still wait for a widespread deployment of vaccines, because that's going to take some time. And I think moving forward, these best practices are going to need to be refined and iterated, and bad actors who aren't following the rules are going to have to be penalized. But overall, I think there's a really growing market for these innovations. And as Stephen said, the Toronto region as a tech hub is really well positioned, and organizations and institutions like U of T, that's really the opportunity for the engineers there and for the innovators in our community.
If I can just make one quick comment, Chris, not to jump in here, but the work that Marcy and her team are doing is really exceptional work, and I'd highly recommend everybody just to take a look and see what it is. It's a great framework. It really paints the right story, and it's really going to be critical. That work is so critical to the success of this region going forward. So I just want to put that plug in because I think it's really important that we all take a look at that.
Thank you.
From what I hear, you guys are both brilliant at what you do, but I just want to take a slight slant. Being a child of Nortel and Bell Northern Research, where Canada led the world, I think one of our key challenges is there's an opportunity to take with COVID that I think we need to jump on. And a critical part of that is all the wealth creation, right? Like I did not go to U of T, but I worked very well with Chris closely, and I have relatives who go to U of T. It's a brilliant university, but my question is, how do we keep the grads in Canada? How do we keep the U of T grads coming back and generating wealth? So Marcy, I love what you're doing, but it keeps the current business alive. But my view is, how do we keep generating that whole momentum around Toronto and Canada in terms of what we need to do as industries? And TELUS is lucky. There is a part of TELUS which becomes like power. Like if you ask somebody, would you rather lose your internet or your power? They'd rather lose their power because they want to watch their Netflix while they're stuck at home. So I think we need to work together to see what is it that would keep somebody with their great ideas. And Chris says, why are you laughing the first time I met? I said, because I'm tired of engineers who thinks they're researchers. I mean, there is a role for that, which is foundational and fundamental, but it's applied science. So when we talk about the Moderna vaccine, and Chris, you started this thing with the vaccines, it is the delivery mechanism that is revolutionary, not just the antibodies. So there's engineering everywhere, and it'll be amiss for us, I think, together, not to sit down and put them. How do we create these startups in the Toronto area or Canada? They come here, they generate more, and I think part of it we need. There's a huge role for industry. We're going to use these innovations, but also I don't think we're desperate yet. We might get there after this is over. That we will start eating things.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, to look where we're going, we need to take a quick look at where we've come from and where we're at. Think about where we were pre-pandemic. Toronto was the most multicultural city in the world, one of the fastest growing cities in the world, a tech hub, a financial services hub, AI, all that stuff happening. And then all of a sudden the pandemic hits. So boom. So we need to figure out how we get back to where we were and take that next step forward. Mm-hmm. My organization, we want this region to be number one in North America for attracting business. And that includes new business, startups. How do we keep engineers, grads here? So, it's not just one single thing. It's a lot of things. And broadband is going to be critical in what we do here. But I look at this and say, okay, it's going to be a rough few months. We know that. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. We've got the work we do now in the next 6 months is going to set the stage for us as a city region leading, not just the country, but I believe leading North America as we come out of this, right? You guys, you guys are great ideas. Applied science is a great concept. It's great. It's wonderful. It works. There are so many things I think that we can tackle. I just think that we need to rise above all of our levels to think how we can work together and really create a sense of urgency here.
Yeah. And
go ahead, Marcy.
Sorry, I was just going to say that Stephen made a plug for the playbook, the recovery playbook that I worked on with Terry O'Leary at Toronto Global and a number of different city administrators across the region. And really, it was about a number of different things came out. Obviously, the theme of acceleration, right? Like certain trends that were happening pre-COVID have been accelerated by COVID. E-commerce is a good example. The digitization of businesses is a good example. But we had challenges in our region as well. I don't know if folks on the call know this, but 25% of Canada's GDP comes from the innovation corridor, and that stretches from Waterloo region through to Guelph and includes the GTA and Hamilton. 25% of our GDP comes from this region. So the challenges that we faced before the pandemic, livability in the region as it relates to housing costs. The ability to connect people to their jobs, the ability to connect more people to different employment opportunities in the region. Those were challenges before COVID. Those will continue to be challenges, as we get the vaccine and we go into whatever new normal is. But we absolutely need to address that as a region as a whole, as Stephen so rightly pointed out.
But so Chris, I don't even want to ask for a second question, but
the whole discussion is just
but I'm very passionate about this point. Whichever country or collection of cities or municipality emerges stronger will be the winner. Yeah. So two things. One, we're back to normal is not how we were. So Marcy, thank you for mentioning that. Mm-hmm. I think we clearly are not a digital society, regardless of the banks are digital, TELUS is digital. but we're not as a society digital. So when everybody says call this number, geez, like if you do, my 10-year-old has more apps than the 3D. Like the labs, Chris, will never be the same. Education. So I think we have an opportunity of a year plus to reinvent ourselves.
Yeah.
And it is us together. So Stephen, I'm not saying it's yours alone. I think how can we reinvent ourselves so when we exit, as because the whole world's going to exit together, be it third quarter next year or second quarter next year. I love the politicians when they fight. Is it December 9th or December 9th at 12:30 in the afternoon? We got the vaccine. Who gives a shit? By the time we roll it out to the second largest country in the world, there's a so how can we like energize with our intellectual depth, like with the universities, with the playbooks? We got to be, and you're right. I don't want to be. We don't want to be in survival mode. I want to be better than everybody else. So how do we emerge stronger? And I think it's an opportunity we can't miss. So,
Yeah.
So let me, sorry, I don't mean to be the moderator here, Chris, but from your perspective,
I can't be the fanatic. I'm the geek here, Stephen.
So, I mean, like, what does the university think about how we emerge from this pandemic and the role that you will play?
Well, that's actually going to be my next question.
Oh.
But I was going to frame it the other way around: is how do you see the academic question? So let me. Yeah, I'm gonna. I'll start the discussion by actually saying the next question will be around what is this industry academia kind of linkage? How do you see it from your different perspectives? But I'll put the lens of the faculty and what have we done, and I'm going to maybe apply a little bit of a different angles that nothing's paused, right? Everything's continuing to move forward. We didn't stop anything. I mean, the only thing that's really kind of stopped, if you want to put it that way, sort of like, small businesses have stopped being able to operate because of these things, but education doesn't, right? We've got schools and you've still got people moving through the system. So the university fundamentally has had to adapt significantly to our mandate, right? You can't pause a student in the middle of their undergraduate degree. You can't pause a grad student in the middle of their research project. All their things are still moving forward. So we've been adapting significantly in how we enable students to continue to drive their research forward, enable our ongoing research partnerships with industry to keep moving those forward, because we're really looking at what are those developments that are going to help us in the next stage of the recovery, in a sense. Marcy, you talked about e-commerce. I mean, U of T Engineering has a smart freight center, right? Looking at the logistics of delivering freight into a congested city. And, what better example than right now, everybody trying to get their Amazon packages before Christmas, right? So engineering already has these and has, in a sense, a lot of these platforms in play, and they're becoming increasingly important. Research in the university sector that's tied to COVID, whether it's vaccine development, vaccine vectors, delivery, operations research, managing healthcare workers, that sort of stuff. Those are all engineering programs for which our faculty and students are actively engaged. So yeah, we've done a lot to continue our activity, but I do want to cycle back so that it's actually me asking you guys questions. As you've alluded to, sort of industry and academia are really kind of the linchpin for the success of the region, but actually, as Ibrahim was saying, success of the country, right? Moving the entire economic engine forward, even if 25% of GDP is sitting in the GTA, but it's affecting everybody. How do you see what kind of opportunities do you see going forward? How do you see industry working with academia now to move things forward? What do you see as the need from industry from an institution? Whether it's on the educational front, whether it's from the partnership front, and maybe a different question, do you foresee changes in the nature of the workforce going forward? In the skill sets, are there things that we should be thinking about from an academic perspective? But also, how do you see these partnerships being so critical to the recovery?
Well, let me just first of all say that, but they are critical. I mean, if we take, there's a number of points you raise here. And the university can play many roles. One, it's really on to me one of the most important areas is just talent. I mean, adjusting to what industry needs and where is the future going and what's going to happen in terms of everything from artificial intelligence, machine learning to cybersecurity to the impact on manufacturing of technology, all of those things. And then there's the research piece, which is absolutely critical. And then there's the applied work, and then some of the work that U of T and engineering have done for some of our clients around solving problems. Right. So there are lots of ways where industry and universities need to interact. But I really want to go and keep what I think is the theme of this. And Ibrahim mentioned it is like we're going to come out of this mess eventually, and there are some jurisdictions that are going to lead. Right. We need to be that jurisdiction. Like I think the country is going to look to Toronto, even though they might not admit it, but to take the lead on all this stuff. And like we've got to get past talking. We've got to figure out some really concrete steps, like they're doing at the Board of Trade. But really, like the sense of urgency is going to be critical because if we're not leading, we're falling behind. And I just think that we all have a role to play in this. And I think that I mean we're lucky to have a university like University of Toronto that's considered one of the world leading places. I mean that's a quiver in our backside really to work with.
I'm gonna, sorry, but Marcy, I'll let you answer, but I think I should break the Torontonians apart a little bit, have a bit of a Canadian view.
Sure.
So,
So hold it. Just before I say that, I just moved here, but I absolutely agree 100% that this is a Canadian initiative, not just Toronto. I'm just saying that
no, Steve,
really, yeah, I got
I'm not slamming
my East
you
Coast
on.
hat on, and you have your Western hat on.
No, I'm from Montreal, like originally. So
Okay.
but speaking as a TELUS geek here, our chief geek, I just want to, like one of the things you mentioned that I want to latch onto. I think when we think of consume local, we have to think of innovation, including TELUS.
Mm-hmm.
So I think one of the biggest thing we can give this, if you think of universities as a farm team that go to industry and create wealth, right? Before they come to the NHL, and sadly, if an American's watching, he'll wonder what the hell's that. But for Canadians, it is very critical that we consume innovations locally. And I was talking earlier on ISET, and I think ISET's trying very hard. But I have to say, I'm not against the politicians, but they believe giving money to a party would solve it. So chatting with the U of T and the partnership that we're striking with U of T as TELUS, I said, Chris, you'll get $0, but there's billions of dollars of intellect that we would love to share with you. We would love to take the students. If you have startups, we would fund those. And I think, Stephen, before Marcy weighs in on what, because I'm going to read that friggin' playbook. Because I think it's important that we all get acclimated, right? Like if we're going to do it together, I think the critical piece for us is how do we consume locally these innovations, and as they come out of U of T, they are the best engineers or the best graduates in the world, because you know what, they've got access to the government of Ontario, they've got access to the TELUS network. So at least in our space, they're played where no other person played, because that will be a fundamental differentiator. And when they have an idea, hell, why don't we use local? Like we talk about, like I go to my local butcher and somebody says, well, it's cheaper if you go to Safeway, which is local. It's it's Sobeys, right? I said, yeah, but like, you know, I know him, he's my neighbor. But this should be applied the same innovations, I think. So I don't think it's money. I think, Stephen, one critical thing you mentioned that I think is fundamental, we got to revisit how we think we excite our industry. Because the way our currency today is the government pays a university or pays a program. Well, I mean, we don't need money. Like, as you said, we got all the banks. Toronto's got all the banks. We've got all the wealth. Like, what do we need to do as a nation? Because it makes us better. Like, don't increase my taxes, though.
If I could just step in here, Chris, around
Sure.
around I think the challenge, and I think that we're kind of waiting around it a little bit. In that one of the things that we saw when the pandemic first hit is unprecedented cooperation amongst levels of government, right? Unprecedented cooperation and collaboration amongst people who don't typically collaborate or don't have time to collaborate and and coordinate on viewpoints. And I'm going to come back to the playbook. I love that this is the theme, but we brought these city administrators across the innovation corridor. They've got day jobs. And I would say that their day jobs became day and night jobs. With dealing with the pandemic, they were dealing. Toronto's dealing with their 50,000 plus employees and how they were going to respond to this pandemic. Same with Mississauga and York Region and Durham Region, and and others that were part of this process. But I think that the key theme of why we acted so quickly is because we figured out how to coordinate, how to cooperate quickly. And that needs to stay. There needs to be no excuse anymore for our three levels of government to really coordinate on what is best and what will make us stronger going forward. And I think that same holds true for I think what you're talking about, Ibrahim, a bit is the commercialization of the research that we do here. The keeping it in Canada. Part of what this group identified as a barrier and is something that we really need to, on the other side of COVID, deal with is these procurement issues. Right, the government of Ontario, federal government is certainly this is top of mind to them, but it's also top of mind to the municipalities who there's a lot of money there when you speak to wealth that can actually be targeted to our local innovators, our local technology companies, to solve for problems that are of digital transformation of our city's government services, for example. Right, there are actual there are legal barriers, there are all sorts of barriers that don't allow those folks to compete the same way as larger businesses may compete. And I think that's really where we need to when you're talking about how do we really up our ante, up our game on the other side. I think it's figuring out how to more easily solve for just barriers to cooperation, that can unlock some of the wealth you're talking about, that can unlock some of the potential in keeping it in Canada. So I'll stop talking about the playbook.
No, no, but Marcy, keeping it in Canada for the world, because I think one thing this pandemic taught us,
Yeah.
we can compete anywhere. Like I was chatting with Chris and smiling. I said, if you're a Chinese student or an East Indian student or a Korean,
Yeah.
and your parents do have that 50K a year plus expenses, would you pick U of T or MIT? I think it's how can we make a person applied while they're remote, right, for the next little while? And I think the beauty of Canada, you're right, we actually can knock these barriers down very quickly. So when we talk about the pandemic, like it would take me and Bell 6 months to agree on a link. We saw what happened in China. We saw what happened in Europe. It was in half an hour, guys. Boom, we got to do this. So Rogers, TELUS, Bell, Videotron. I think we as Canadians, forget about the political bullshit, but as bureaucrats, do get together and do solve the problem. And I think if we kind of collapse these layers, Marcy, as you're saying, are they handoffs? That is the differentiator that U of T needs. Because if I go to U of T, hell, I can see an application at TELUS in light. Versus if you go to MIT, you can go research, and 80 years later, you launch your patent. So we need to provide that differentiation across the chain. I think we can. I know we can.
So, yeah, I'll just chime in. I think, Marcy, you identified, and even you said the same thing. One of the key things that the pandemic has done for all of us is help us realize how agile we can actually be in response to this huge step change. I'll just point out from a university governance perspective, our ability, we flipped from in person over 48 hours to online, right? 6,000 courses go boom, done. And it's like, well, this would have taken us forever if we tried to go the normal route. We saw so many quick changes that were made, partly because it was sort of extenuating circumstances, but you actually realize that by making that change, it's actually made a huge difference in our ability to respond to situations, and we've come up with much better solutions where you debated it for endlessly. You'd never, it'd be your 80 years to get your patent approach that Ibrahim's talking about. So agility and the ability to break barriers down and to work towards the kind of this common purpose, I think is really key. And for universities to identify vehicles which allow us to more rapidly translate, more quickly move through partnerships and strategies, and come up with innovative vehicles for partnering with industry, for instance, I think is really what's going to be key for driving and translating out some of these innovations that we've been talking about. Too often, I think we get bogged down in sort of the bureaucracy of it, and I think we want to move things forward. I think despite you saying you're not going to get any money out of us, I think we're getting a lot more from the relationship with TELUS, because it is about it's about the call it the in kind. It's about the mentorship. It's about working with the corporates and working with companies to learn what the challenges are, because those become the inspirational fuel for admittedly our main output, which is our students, right? Our graduate students, our undergrads. We're going to move into those fields and launch those startups and move these things forward. And again, keeping them in the region becomes key. And we've certainly seen that in the region. U of T and affiliated institutions. I'm not going to just keep us to U of T, but I think we create an ecosystem here where companies are seeing that the talents here, we want to come here because we want to set up bases because of that strong link to the expertise, but also U of T's emerging sort of agility and ability to create innovative partnerships.
So let me stop you there for a second. So why did it take a crisis for you guys to seem to act so quickly? And so what happens when we see a light at the end of the day and we're all getting vaccinated? Does that mean we go back and to where we were? Like, how do you keep this transformation going? And how do you see, we all think that we need to do things quickly, and many industries have really adapted, not all. And I really, particularly in the small business side of it, I really, it's unfortunate what's happening in many of those sectors, but some sectors have pivoted on a dime, and they've really taken advantage of what's happening here. And a few months ago, try and get a barbecue in the summer, or some wood, or a bicycle. Think about that, the small things. But how do we make sure that when we see the light at the end of the tunnel, we don't stop and become complacent?
Yeah, that to me is a really interesting question. We know, I think from the university's perspective, we've recognized that things that we thought would be really difficult to implement, this distance learning, the online, we've realized this actually does work well, but not in all cases, but it gives us an opportunity now to come up with more innovative models for delivering education, right? For teaching our students. And so we're seeing that because of the pivot, we won't go back. The odds of going back to just sage on the stage, hundreds of people in a lecture room, that's not going to happen. But we've got innovative new models. There's so much effort that's gone into the transition that you don't want to waste that effort. I think what we've seen is that there are industries who may have thought that there were well, there's no reason for us to pivot into this space because there's no opportunity. Now the opportunity shows up, and they make that pivot and realize this is actually an interesting strategy. We were talking earlier about backyard sheds for home offices.
But I think, sorry, Chris, to interrupt. I think the key point for us, what the pandemic has shown us, is we need to interact digitally. And the World Economic Forum says we suck as human beings to innovate on Zoom. And all of us are averaging 12, 13 hours. But I think there's some enablers we need between privacy laws, and we're pretty religious. We call it privacy by design at TELUS. But what do we need to upgrade so the bank will release to the butcher or to the pizza place or to the lawyer enough information so we don't have to do it? I have to give you an example. I'm with Stephen. Canada ranks 3 institutions between Amy, Mila, and Vector in the top 20 globally. For a country our size, we're very small. But when we have artificial intelligence, 3 bodies, which is amazing for a country our size of 40 million people, we got 3 bodies in the top 20. Yet what the UK did is they provided 900 million health records and said, here, go extract some fundamental stuff out of it. We tend to we have all these capabilities, and then Canadian engineers do better with the UK data on count and better outcome I'm not slamming anybody. It's the way we are. But I believe one thing that taught us, and we talk about operations research, which is fundamental when you're dishing out vaccine. I think it's very important to revisit some of, not the holy grails, but how we're organized, because we're not organized for a digital society. We clearly stumbled, right? Like, for example, we had the smart city competition, remember? Like Montreal won it, Toronto bid, Vancouver bid, Edmonton bid. Well, I'm wondering how tough would it be to give a blueprint for all the cities to implement it? Instead of 50 million bucks going to Montreal,
Yeah.
make it 100 and give them all that identity or persona. Like there's the Marcy who's a thinker. There's the Marcy who's got a job. There's the Marcy who lives in Toronto. Like for me, I love playing football. I love to cook. These are all different parts of me. Shouldn't they interact digitally to give us all better outcomes? So I think, Chris, I don't want to slam what you're saying. Sadly, we're agreeing. What is it that we need foundationally and we can fund as an industry to, and Stephen, you will take the lead in North America, because I have to be honest, the barriers are not dropping in other major cities, be it in New York, be it San Francisco. You'll likely get Austin to compete with you, but there's not much they can compete. It's like,
But yeah, Ibrahim, just on that though, it's one thing to talk about the big cities. We've got a pretty large rural population in the country, and the digital, the digital world is every bit as critical, if not more so, to the success of this country, and particularly the region, the rural areas. So, I mean, that's one area that I just think is so critical to our future.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's what are those enablers of the digital economy, and they have to do with legislation, they have to do with digital infrastructure, they have to do with skills, that of the future and what we'll need. And one of the pieces that I was gonna suggest on the institutional side is there's always this lag between how institutions might prepare the workforce for the needs of the workforce. And I think what you're saying, Chris, is that we can actually respond to that lag more quickly now with some of the transformations that have been made. So how do you really harness that, and how do you create these feedback loops so that the institutions know what kind of skill sets are going to be needed in the next 3, 6, 9, 12 kind of months, and then understanding what that looks like in your own local community, and where through digital means you can connect to communities outside your local community for that talent. But part of this whole micro credentialing approach to skilling people up is also something I think that universities and governments have been looking at. But it's really narrowing that lag between what industry needs and from their workforce, and what can be delivered through some of our institutions.
Yeah, I'll agree. I think one of the challenges for the institutions, and something that we're actively looking at right now, is that our majority of our graduates are undergrads, and then they go off to industry. But the pace of technological change is so fast, right? That when they go out, then they're working, and then it shifts so quickly. And we're moving towards this model of this lifelong learning, and ways of which we can help reskill talent that's already out there, and continue to build this up. And I think that's another place for the academic institutions to play a huge role, is just in that continuing education space. But also built into this is obviously our research agenda and moving the innovations forward. I want to kind of maybe bring it back a little bit to sort of the discussion around kind of the tech development space. And this is a bit of a question, I think, to Ibrahim and to Stephen, and actually to Marcy as well, obviously all of you. Um, how do we keep our homegrown innovation and our homegrown talent, or even talent we attract here, in the region? Stephen, your Toronto Global's focus on helping to bring companies here. We use engineering here as a major attractor, but how do we keep them in the region? What's the major driver to do that right now? Is it the need for the governments to be more agile about releasing additional resources to keep companies here so they can scale? We do a great job at launching lots of startups. A lot of our startups in the Toronto region, Leg Up Computing just got purchased. Blue Rock. These things sort of emerge, and some stay, some leave. But how do we keep them in the country?
That's a good question. It's really there's so many parts of that
Yeah.
question to answer. But first of all, is to get them here. Get our people into the right into schools and keeping lifelong learning, as you said, attracting people and companies here. That's the first step. Keeping them here is based on a couple of things. Number one, the work. Um, is there enough of a cluster of companies that will excite me? And if it doesn't work in one area, then I can go to another, right? So a cluster is great to have. Financing, like a venture capital, you mentioned some of the companies, having that right ecosystem in place to provide that, mentorships, all that. The other piece is just simply a quality of life. Toronto is a big city. Not everybody wants to live in a big city, and we're seeing what the pandemic is doing, but a lot of people do. It's a great city. It's one of the world's great cities, and a lot of people want to live here.
Mhm.
Pre-pandemic, we were taking in 100,000 immigrants every single year into this city. So once we get through this pandemic, I believe that demand will come back, and even more so. So, but some of the things that Marcy mentioned, that what they're working on, are the fundamental basics of living. You want to live in a place where you want to live, where it's fun, transportation systems, social housing, all those things are really critical. But I also think what you're going to see is a transformation of cities. Like, I think we're going to go to cities and cities, like 30% of the workforce may always work from home. And so if you take an area, let's say there's a big bank downtown and 30% of your workers are living in one area of the city, let's say it's Markham, then maybe you're going to see a bank hub there. So, right, so people can travel 15 minutes and get everything they possibly need. So there are a lot of things I think they're going to transform cities, and Toronto is a multicultural, international, attractive place to live. But there's lots we can do to make sure we keep them here.
Mhm.
I mean, there's a real risk to downtown. It's like let's talk practically, right? Like TELUS, we realize one of the main attractions is with both parents working, we needed it flexible. So we have what we call work style. So we were around 75% pre-COVID work from home, and it went to 90%. Some jobs, there's no way around it. So
Mm.
it didn't hit us like people saying, oh, I have to see how my people work from home or whatnot. But I think there is a reality that downtowns will get reshaped, right? Like we saw
Mhm.
all the rural areas, like farms are going for stupid amounts of money because people don't know how long it is. But it goes back to Marcy, you talk about being connected. I think we need a fundamental program to
Mhm.
build, right? Like it's not giving somebody in Toronto $5 off their phone bill. That's
Right.
not going to help build somebody that, to be completely honest, I'll give you some data. It'll cost $4,000 in rural Canada to get somebody in a village broadband access. So I can give you a break of $5 for the rest of your life. That's still not going to cover the costs for one person. So we as Canadians need to step up. Like before I immigrated to Canada, what, 30, 40 years ago, I heard that Bell used to use long distance to subsidize local everywhere. So you pay in Toronto as much as in somewhere which is like 500 kilometers away. Do we need the same thing? I'm not advocating. We're not crown corporations, but I think we need to do it, right? Like we collectively, all telcos pay what, 4 or 5 billion a year in spectrum fees. Well, we still pay it. Like, fine, it's part of the tax that you in the end pay as subscribers. Should we use that $5 billion windfall to the government to subsidize rural Canada? Because I think Stephen, you mentioned it earlier. I'm 100% with you. You have to think of Toronto as 10,000 square kilometers instead of the downtown core, right? Is that ecosystem. So when you need to meet, yes, you can make it post COVID in a year from now. Like it's you're not taking a plane; it's an hour and a half ride. But I think I worry a bit about our downtowns, the real estate. Like I think a lot of people woke up said, "Well, actually, 50% of my guys can work away. Why do I have this fantastic tower? Let me sell it." But whoever was going to rent from you is in the same boat. I think it's a bit of an issue.
Y-
The I want to sort of um, work off of that a bit. I think it's an interesting question then, right? I mean, if you're looking for Stephen in particular or for Marcy, I mean, if you're looking at a hollowing out of a city because people can now start to work differently in different locations, does that change how you, what sort of sectors might move into the region then. Toronto's got this downtown core, which is banks, giant bank towers, where you don't want more than 3 people in an elevator now going up 70 stories. What replaces that? Universities downtown. What industries do you see saying, well, we need to be close to the university or close to an academic center in order to do our collaborations? You hinted that 30% of people can still work remote, but I think in an industry university collaboration, you actually want to be on site. We have a number of co-creation labs within campus or near campus where we're leveraging the fact that you've got engineers from corporate X working with our faculty members and our grad students in proximity. You need that. And as we were saying earlier, that's really a bit of the secret sauce to drive these things forward. How do you see that changing if we look at a hollowing out of the city?
So if I can just talk a little bit about some of the work that the board is doing, I'm a bit of a numbers geek, and what you find in the downtown center, and so there's the financial district, but there's lots of areas, as you say. I mean, university campus is really part of the downtown area. The hospitals are part of the downtown area. These incubators, accelerators, Mars is part of the downtown area. About 68% of the jobs can work remotely. Have some capacity to work remotely in that downtown area. But think about it, that's 40, there's quite a bit of jobs, there's quite a few jobs that are face to face. And then there's quite a few businesses that support the people that are coming down there. So I think we definitely have to mitigate against this, hollowing out of the core. I'm a bit of suspect of that.
Sure.
And the board is actually doing some work and working with folks in the financial district to look at mitigation techniques that are used across the world to really bring people, have that sense of safety of people coming back to work. We're working on a downtown pilot. But I think undoubtedly, there's probably going to be a certain amount of people who are going to do a certain percentage of people who are going to work remotely. And this will have some kind of structural change, even if it's like 10, 20%, that's substantial. So then the question is, what do you do with those spaces? I think Ibrahim before our call talked about, the innovation. There's this co-location aspect to innovation that happens. What's going to happen to our innovation, acceleration or deceleration if we don't go back, if we don't open up safely and bring people back to conditions whereby they can collaborate together? And then secondly, if we do have some more space that is not going to be dedicated to office, how can we be nimble as a city, in our zoning bylaws, in our, in the way we approach, reclassification of uses in buildings. So you can actually add a daycare center to 3 floors of TD if that's what's necessary, kind of thing. I mean, that's the kind of thinking that I think we need to do. But I am suspect of, the jury's out on whether innovation can continue at the pace it was happening prior to COVID. If we don't get back to this sort of co-location model. I think it's an interesting one to look at.
Yeah, if I can just make a comment, I really think we suffer from an innovation perspective by not being together. Pre-pandemic, the office vacancy rate in downtown Toronto was 2.8%. It's pretty small, and a lot of those buildings are owned by REITs. In a recent survey, 50% of landlords expect a decreased requirement for space. But so I don't see a hollowing out downtown, but I do see a change in the way we work. And I do see opportunities for areas outside of the downtown that can be hubs. Like if you can set up a hub in Burlington where people can save a couple of hours of commute, I mean, that could be a great productivity enhancement. I just don't see it, Chris, because the simple reason I think Toronto is a global city. We're going to attract global companies. We're going to attract the best and the brightest people. U of T is going to be prosperous. As Marcy said, the way we work will change. I just don't see a hollowing out, put it that way, but I do see the way we work is going to change.
Yeah, and I want to endorse and support the idea of that. Innovation hubs work because you have collaboration and you have the ability for people to the literal bump into each other, maybe 6 feet apart for right now, but bumping into each other and having that conversation in shared space, like our Mars space, like our new Schwartz Research Innovation Center, which is going up, like our on-campus spaces where we have co-creation, collaboration space. The fact that you've got industry researchers directly interfacing with the academics to help spur the innovation, come up with ideas. To Ibrahim's point, right? It's about that shared knowledge base and the ability to kind of be agile in your ability to answer these questions and to build opportunities. And this is something that engineering is excited and moving forward in, which is creating more co-creation space to facilitate these kind of interactions and to Marcy, to your point, creating agile space where we can allow companies to come in, build out research partnerships with us, investigate those opportunities, and then you establish that base, and then you can build out to a much larger space in other regions as you realize the benefits of being close to the university and building those partnerships, accessing the talent, accessing the research resources at the institution, but also accessing the programs that are available from the provincial government through the federal government, all those kind of leveraging opportunities that show up because you've started to build these industry linkages. And we're certainly very keen to kind of make sure that conversation continues and in fact grows despite the fact that we're
Well, I like Chris, I just want to go back to I think Marcy was saying, like these downtown areas. This is where I think getting people multidisciplinary will take that innovation A to Z, which I think is very critical. I want to bring us a bit to reality from my reality, but it has to involve with somebody consuming, be it a TELUS, be it an RBC, be it a government of Ontario. But I think it'll be brilliant, like all these spaces, like have a floor that does augmented reality, like for whatever it is, or AIML. I don't know if we can afford it based on what we've paid, but I think it is very critical to have that whole ecosystem. And I think that is a great reinvestment in downtown because it is central for transportation. But I do believe when your job is so remote, why the hell would you, like, especially for you guys? So I live right downtown Edmonton. I see nothing but trees, and I'm 7 minutes from my office. That is not a Toronto problem. Like I have colleagues in my team and who commute for an hour and a half every day. It's not 3 hours of their life. But if they were building a startup or being with the guy who builds, designs, architect, consumes, sculpts, that is priceless. They would do it till they get something done in 2-3 years. So we have to look at this opportunity. I'm 100% with you. And I would probably move to Toronto. One of my favorite restaurants is there.
Well, when it opens, you can move back. Yeah.
Yeah, anytime. We'll make sure we get together and get us all back together in person for sure. We're coming up on the end of our. I wanted to actually. I'm just going to kind of do a wrap. That was a terrific actually segue to what our opportunities lie ahead for us. I think this has been really an amazing discussion. Terrific sharing of ideas, active discussion. In fact, we sort of swapped moderators for a second there on what we can do and how we've all responded. And I think that's really been key. The agility, the resilience that all sectors have shown, the innovation that can emerge from these discussions, and the opportunities for building partnerships, and really the tight synergy between the university industry, using TELUS as an example, but more broadly, right? The ways in academics and universities can interact with all sectors and help to build a more vibrant economy for the region, but also to help us all recover from the pandemic. I mean, you can name the ideas that emerge out of this. We talked about the vaccine, there's supply chain, there's logistics. The rural divide, which has now come up, I think is one which it's super important for Canada, the ability to improve telecom into the rural community so you can actually allow that in a much more facilitated way. I think that's an important distinction. We've seen for our own students that are remote, that telecom is vital to the success of their online education. We certainly know it's going to be vital for industry as well going forward. So lots of opportunities, I guess, across the board for this. New ways for us to work together interactively, and not two-dimensionally. At some point, we will have an AR and we'll all have a hologram and we'll be sitting around a virtual you know, Star Wars Jedi table and actually discussing stuff. We'll actually see each other in 3D. That someone's working on that, I'm sure. But I think this discussion has been great. Really provided us with a terrific global outlook on what we can do going forward and how our recovery is really a way to bring all of us together, whether it's the engineers with the technical solutions, the social scientists with the impact on mental health of the pandemic, the healthcare workers, to the politicians and the financial gurus who are going to try to figure out how to inject dollars into the economy and get us restarted, as we sort of heard from the financial statement about a week ago. I want to thank everybody. This has been a tremendous conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time and being part of this discussion. Vibrant discussion. Lots of stuff has been streaming on the chat. For the audience which has been tuned in, thank you so much for participating, being here today. We'd love to continue this conversation actually going forward. And so U of T Engineering, our partnerships office, has established a Slack channel where you can all sign up and actually continue this discussion. We'd love to do that. Get questions, get comments, link you up with Stephen, with Marcy, with Ibrahim, and even others who we work with in our partnerships office to really continue a discussion about how to work between the sectors to really continue to grow the economy and to recover soon enough. We will all be out of this next year. This will be in person.
Chris, let me just say first, finally, so thanks for doing this. Really appreciate it. It was great. But just to say that you and your team have been fantastic to work with, and I want to make sure that you realize that how important you are to all of our success. Just the work you're doing at the school. So thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Stephen.
Yeah,
Thanks for having me. And
yeah.
nice meeting you, Marcy and Stephen. Looking forward
pleasure.
to real glass of wine and a meal. Chris can pay.
That's right. It's on me when we all get together in person at your favorite restaurant here in Toronto.
Cool. Stay safe, guys. Have a great weekend. Thank you. Thanks for having us.
All right. Take care.